back of the rim. Got it! Oh, the slam! Oh, using Curry way downtown. Oh, what a shot from Curry!
No smooth ad intro today, I just gotta get this out of the way first. Thanks to SeatGeek for sponsoring this video. SeatGeek is the amazing app that provides you with the easiest way to buy tickets for almost any kind of event, which would most likely be sports related for you all. The app pulls tickets from all over the web and has them in one place to make purchasing one for your event really easy, and it also assures you'll be getting the best value for your ticket. While searching for your tickets, each one is ranked with a score from 1 to 100 that lets you know if you're getting a good deal or not for your purchase. On top of that, the app also provides you with the detailed view of what you would see from your seat before you even get there, which is extremely helpful. If you're interested in downloading this app, the links will be in both the comment section and highlighted in the description. If you're still on the fence, consider using my promo code DOM2K to get $20 off your first purchase. The present day is March 2019, and Giannis Antetokounmpo is at least well on his way to being exactly where me and many others said he'd be 2 years ago. As a matter of fact, in a January 2017 video, I had him pegged as the next face of the NBA once LeBron James retired. So in our current situation, he now leads the Bucks in basically every major statistical category. They have the best record in the league while boasting a historic point differential for an Eastern Conference team, and he's got an amazing chance to be the MVP. He's probably the favorite. He's in the running for Defensive Player of the Year, and with any luck, he's possibly got his name in the hat for an NBA championship and a Finals MVP. Dare I say, this would instantly become one of the greatest seasons by any player ever if he accomplished even most of what's up there, especially if they dethrone Golden State. Oh, by the way, this guy was drafted 15th overall in the 2013 NBA draft. Yeah, it definitely doesn't feel like 6 years have passed, and it also doesn't feel like 14 flipping teams let future face of the league material just slip from their grasp. So today we set out to answer the question, well, two questions. Why was he up there all this time? And where are the players now that were taken before him? What have they done with their careers? Also, for each team, I'm gonna give a brief explanation of why it did or did not make sense for them to pass on Giannis. So for part 1, this is actually very straightforward, as Giannis being drafted 15th overall was pretty appropriate, although that sounds ludicrous in 2019. You had teams like the Mavericks that passed on him because they were simply in win now mode, therefore they had no business taking on a long-term project, which is exactly what Giannis was. You had teams that already had his positions filled, and for the teams that just had higher picks overall, of course they were poised to make the selections they thought could help them right away. Like the Cavaliers were just exiting the LeBron James era. I understand they totally screwed up by taking Bennett, but they did not see Giannis as a timely answer to help Kyrie out either. It also did not help that he was like this mysterious shadow figure before the draft. That quite literally embodied the definition of playing the lottery. He was really discovered around the time he was 14, 15 years old, and he also spent a lot of time in Greece's second division league. So whereas most prospects were in training camps, summits, basically spots where they were very accessible to scouts, you were either looking at Giannis through grainy footage that looked like he was in a grade school gym, or you were watching him dominate talent you just did not think would speak for what he could do in the NBA. With that being understood, it's not some huge joke that so many teams chose a different direction. Of course now we're in 2019, and who wouldn't love to have this guy locked up for the next 10 years, right? But in 2013, he was exactly what then Bucks GM John Hammond said: potential. It was one of those things where if it worked out, great, and if it didn't, it really was a bit of a long shot anyways. And with that being said, most of us looked at this guy in 2015 when he was still only averaging 13 points a game, and we're already bracing ourselves for what's going on now. And since he very well may be the face of the league sooner than later, we absolutely have to look at where the 14 players drafted before him wound up, because none of them became better players. Anthony Bennett, wow. This guy just might be the most infamous bust of the modern era, considering that this was 6 years ago now, but you still hear his name floating around even if it's for the wrong reasons. I say that because the low-hanging fruit is to jab at how bad of a selection he was for the Cavs. And he was, don't get me wrong. But to his credit, he has not flamed out yet. First of all, he didn't even officially bow out of the NBA until 2017 following his final 23-game stint with the Brooklyn Nets. That was not that long ago, and in the present day, he's actually been having somewhat of a resurgence in the G League. He now plays for the Clippers G League team, and it's not going terrible compared to what you might expect. Through 25 games, he's averaging 12 points, but the most important thing is that he's shooting 55% from the field and 45% from 3 on around 5 attempts per game. So while the numbers aren't eye-popping by any stretch, he's at least trending in the direction of the modern NBA by developing a perimeter shot which he did not have during his pro years. He's also said in an interview that he's more motivated than ever to succeed and prove that he deserved to be a #1 pick. It's a tall task, but coach's main knock on him throughout his time in the league was his drive, his work ethic. So he's taking steps to correct that. And don't be surprised at all if he lands on another NBA roster in the near future. The Cavaliers went on to get LeBron James and win the NBA championship shortly after this pick, so although they'd probably love having Giannis right now, their storyline was obviously something completely different that didn't involve long-term investments in draft picks. Everyone's probably somewhat satisfied in this case. I know I'm happy that Giannis is not toiling away in Cleveland right now. Next up, the Orlando Magic selected Victor Oladipo. It's crazy because a couple of years ago, the 2013 draft looked horrible, but it has actually produced some studs. One of the absolute stars that it produced was Oladipo, and I hate even going here because we know where he is right now. After being bounced to OKC, then to Indy where it seemed they'd been fleeced, he went on to win Most Improved Player last season while nearly leading the first Eastern team in 8 years to knock out LeBron James. And yeah, his current situation is just really heart-wrenching. I'd love to be saying that he's leading a 50-win Pacers team to an unexpected 3rd seed, and that they have an amazing chance to upset one of the other 4 top dogs. But instead, he's nursing a devastating injury where we don't truly know if he's ever going to be the same. All the best wishes to Victor. The Orlando Magic let a great talent go as usual when they traded Oladipo, so it's not even worth discussing what a Giannis situation would have looked like there. Hell, there's little to no chance that he would have developed properly, and they probably would have traded him long before he got the chance to, so no great what-ifs to ponder here. At the 3rd spot, Wilt Chamberlain's unconfirmed long-lost son, also known as Otto Porter, was taken by the Washington Wizards to fill the 3 next to Wall and Beal. That was actually a legitimate hope back then, a scenario where they grew together and became a big 3. And while Otto is not terrible or anything, he wound up getting paid far more than he was worth when Brooklyn tried to sign him as a restricted free agent and Washington matched. So I don't think he's been looked at favorably up to now. He's a new member of the Chicago Bulls young core after the recent trade, and for what they're trying to do there, he's not bad. He's currently averaging 18 points and 6 rebounds while shooting 49% from 3 in 10 games there. Anyways, the Bulls have a bright young future with guys like Markkanen, Levine, and potentially Zion Williamson. There's a lot of good that can happen there, and Porter may be a part of it. On the other hand, the Wizards are now smoldering as Bradley Beal leads the league in miles ran per night trying to carry them. And now John Wall has a torn Achilles that very well may mean we won't even see him until the 2021 season. He's also on like a bajillion-dollar contract, so it's a tough scene over there. If you rewind time, it feels like it would have been amazing to have Giannis playing next to Beal and Wall, but again, that's because of the Giannis we know right now. In reality, the Wizards fall into that category of teams that did not have time to wait for his development, as it looked like Wall and Beal were getting ready to take off. And now Washington just lives sadly ever after. Charlotte chose Cody Zeller, and okay, damn. Cody isn't a scrub or anything, but he's still a role player for them that does not seem like he'll ever become a franchise cornerstone. In the 6 years since they drafted him, they probably would have just been better off fostering Giannis's development, and maybe he and Kemba would be running the East by now. This was the 4th pick, so again, the Hornets were probably looking for something more immediate, but damn man, even when you consider then and now, Giannis was just a lost opportunity for them. I mean, they did make the playoffs that year, so maybe they felt they were ahead of the project player stage. I don't know, that's real tough for Charlotte. At number 5, the Phoenix Suns took Alex Len, and man was there a lot of hype around him back then that has pretty much just amounted to him being a role player. He spent the first 5 seasons there making little progress, and is now a member of the Hawks showing no signs that he'll ever fulfill what some people had envisioned for him years ago. The Suns' situation back then was confusing though. On one hand, they had a really good season that year, pretty much only missing the playoffs at 48 wins because they played in the Western Conference. At that time, it seemed like they had somewhat of a future, so for that specific reason, taking on a project in Giannis probably wouldn't have benefited either side. Plus, this version of history has blessed them with Booker and Ayton. And you've got to think that at some point, that team will be formidable whenever they decide to give Ayton more touches on offense. The Pelicans picked up Nerlens Noel, who fell to them because of a torn ACL in college, and he was immediately traded to the Sixers for Jrue Holiday when they were just firing up the tank engine. Before the injury, I believe Noel was projected to be like number 1 or very close to it, and he had a much higher ceiling than we've seen him reach to this point. He only spent 2 years with the Sixers, as that was obviously never gonna work with them going the direction of Joel Embiid. He spent a small stint in Dallas, and now plays an important defensive role for the Thunder's second unit, where he averages a block and a steal in only 14 minutes a game. That's not bad at all, and while a bench role for a possible contender isn't what we saw for him 6 years ago, he's playing his role well. The Pelicans are one of the few teams on our list so far that had an obvious superstar in the making already, so it only made sense for them to make immediate moves to surround him with talent, like they did by trading for Holiday that night, and like they'd go on to do in the 2017 trade for DeMarcus Cousins. Giannis did not fit into that strategy, but somehow he and AD may still end up teammates in the near future. Ben Mclemore, yes. He is still alive if you were wondering, as you could have very well thought he died that night that LeBron James dropped Thor's hammer on him. Mclemore showed some improvement in his second year with the Kings, and we all thought he would turn out to be a lot better than he did. But he's flown under the radar so hard that he was on the Grizzlies for a year, then got traded back to the Kings and nobody even noticed. It didn't help his career at all that he fractured his foot in a pickup game before the start of the season with the Grizzlies, and only played 19 games with the Kings this year before falling out of rotation. He was waived by them just over a month ago and was supposed to sign a deal with the Raptors, but complications with the CBA stopped that. But being that he was waived only a month ago, he's likely to sign with another team at some point before we see him officially bow out of the league if he suffers that unfortunate fate. But as far as what the Kings missed out on, I don't even know, man. They've had no luck in like the last decade plus until this season, and this is their second time appearing on a list we've done where they missed out on a franchise-altering player in the draft. Then again, the Kings have needed immediate help pretty much every season before now, and the same was true in 2013 where they had Cousins. So Giannis was not realistic there. Plus, when you consider the fact that some people thought you couldn't even put Giannis in an NBA game back then, I'm sure DeMarcus Cousins would have tweeted out his disappointment. With the 8th pick, the Pistons selected Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, who was currently a part of the circus in Los Angeles. Detroit did good to pair Griffin with Drummond recently, as it looks they'll be back in the playoffs this year, but I think most of their fans would have been happier just taking the last 6 years to develop Giannis instead. They've seen the playoffs one time since 2009, and they were kind of hanging around in no man's land for most of this decade where, like the Hornets, they could have been nurturing a future MVP. With no immediate superstar to tend to before Blake came, yeah, I think they hate that they missed out on this gem that was Giannis. Sorry, Zack. Trey Burke was taken next by the Wolves, who immediately traded him to the Jazz. And he's another one of those guys that people expected much more from coming out of college. Again, not terrible, but he also hasn't really left his mark anywhere either, especially when you consider that he's already bounced around to 4 teams in 6 seasons. In his latest ride on that train, he was merely a detail in the blockbuster deal that landed both him and Porzingis in Dallas. His averages are nothing special to look at, and it's extremely unclear where his career is going at this point. The Wolves were right at the tail end of the Kevin Love era in 2013, and chose to start their rebuild 1 year after this draft when they moved for Wiggins. All things considered, Wolves fans probably wish they would have went ahead and taken Giannis that season, but nobody knew that Kevin Love was only going to play 18 games either, so at that time they probably were not in the rebuild mindset just yet. With a few years of Giannis, the team would have probably still have been bad enough to get Towns in 2015 maybe. That means they could right now have Giannis and Towns instead of Wiggins and Towns. And yeah, Minnesota fans feel that one. Rounding out the top 10, the Blazers selected CJ McCollum, who is definitely the second best pick to come before Giannis. Today, he helps fuel the Blazers offense alongside Damian Lillard, and this one is super fascinating. On one hand, he's panned out well. On the other, the Blazers are that team that we routinely expect to be bounced from the playoffs until they're finally forced to blow it up and send Lillard elsewhere. Now, CJ really broke out around the same time Giannis did in the 15-16 season. So it might feel like the Blazers really missed out on having Giannis next to Lillard instead of CJ, because while he is a great scorer, he's not in the same solar system as Giannis. But you also have to consider that the Blazers 6 years ago already had a good core that went on to win 54 games in 2014. It wasn't until 2016, when basically everybody ditched Lillard, that they had the roster that would have made more sense to bring Giannis onto. So while it sucks they don't have him today, I think Giannis just became available like 2 years too early. Michael Carter-Williams was taken by the Sixers at 11 and had one of the all-time great fakeouts when he exploded in his first NBA game, making us think he was a steal, and that's literally the highlight of his career. After winning Rookie of the Year, he regressed every single season to the point that his career is becoming questionable. He played 16 games with the Rockets this year before being traded back to the Bulls in January, where he was promptly waived, and that's the last we've heard of him. Being that he's played for 5 teams in 6 years, it feels like we're in that stage where we'll probably see him pop up on some G League teams in a 10-day contract, or maybe he'll find a role on some random team, I don't know. He's in the end game now. The Sixers have this weird situation where they took MCW literally right as they started aggressively tanking. They'd cleared away Iguodala and Drew Holiday, so hypothetically, that would have been the perfect situation to take Giannis in. They were terrible enough that it would have made sense to let him develop over time, and they had no immediate star that they needed to be surrounding. So instead of moving forward with Williams, who looked like the future for 1 year, maybe Giannis could have taken on that role. However, it did take him around 2 to 3 seasons to show that he was really going to be that guy, so the Sixers might have just traded him again given how aggressively they were looking for their new path. And I don't think anyone is mad about this anyways. They have one of the better teams on paper in the league right now, featuring 2 young stars that they drafted, so they probably don't care one way or the other. Steven Adams, aka Aquaman, aka the man you do not want to be screened by, was selected by the Thunder at 12. Not only has this panned out beautifully for them, as he's become a vital part of their team throughout the transitions they've had to go through, but it's also pretty much justified. What the hell would they have done with Giannis on a team with KD and Westbrook? And the fact that a 12th pick from 2013 is now their starting center, and one of the more underrated centers in the league, that just really works out nicely for them. He was great for that 2016 team that was nearly in the finals, and he's great for them in the post-KD era. Giannis in OKC was probably never a realistic thing, much like Curry wasn't. At 13, the 2015 Finals MVP, Kelly MMA Olynyk. Dallas selected and traded him to Boston, where I was pleased to hear during the Summer League commentary that we could expect him to develop into a Dirk-type player. That did not happen, and now he plays for the Miami Heat, looking as if he'll likely be a role player for the duration of his career. Like I said at the beginning, Dallas and specifically Mark Cuban had no regrets about the move because they were still competing back then. Giannis made no sense in that scheme, and now they have Luka and Kristaps, so everybody's happy. And finally, the position that absolutely nobody wants to be in. The guy that was drafted right before a future MVP and face of the league, Shabazz Muhammad. As stated before, he was drafted by the Jazz and traded to Minnesota for Trey Burke. Crazy thing is, you'd actually hear a lot of positive things about him for his first few years in Minnesota, but so far his career has very much fizzled out. After being bought out by the Wolves last year, he was coincidentally signed by the Bucks where he played 11 games before being waived, and he's now mysteriously disappeared. I say mysteriously because around the end of his Wolves career, you'd hear about him being such a positive part of what they were doing for the future. And so far, his per 36-minute stats for his career are 19 points and 6 rebounds, which would suggest he might be serviceable somewhere with enough minutes. The latest I could find on him was an interview from last summer where he was a free agent. He claimed to be working out in Los Angeles where he said he was in the best shape of his life, and he was also working to make his game more suitable for teams going forward. But other than that, I've seen no G League appearances, no overseas, nothing. I doubt he's done in the NBA, as like others on this list, they usually get a shot somewhere, but considering most of the people on this list are still in the league, it's kinda shitty that the guy taken right before Giannis is already on a job hunt. As for the Jazz picking right before Giannis, it seemed like they were going forward at that time with Hayward. Millsap played the 4 the season before that for them, and they had a young guy in Derek Favors ready to fill in when Millsap went away. So it made much more sense to try and cash in for a guard like they did with Burke. Plus, they got a good core now, and they've been pretty competitive since 2013, so missing out on Giannis wasn't that devastating, as contradictory as it may sound. And yeah, those were the 14 players drafted before Giannis, and that's what they're up to now. As you can tell, because I started to sound like a broken record there, nearly half of the NBA missing out on Giannis isn't anywhere near as monumental as it sounds when you count in every factor. What positions the teams already had filled, whether they had a star that needed immediate help, what teams even had the perfect situation to bet part of their future on what looked like a hope and a dream, there really was just so much that truly justified him falling to 15. Of course, at this point, the Bucks have all but won an ultimate lottery. The team they had in 2013 blew up right afterwards because it obviously wasn't going anywhere, so it truly opened up this perfect slot of time where they could just nurture Giannis for a while. And because of that, they were a small market team that drafted what could easily be considered the best player in the league right now, and he's in a contending situation by year 6, so they don't really have fear of losing him. Fuck are they gonna tell us next? They found the Dragon Balls? So what happens this season remains to be seen. He's already having one of the best outings ever, but if he can somehow cap this off with an NBA title, it would quickly catapult into one of the greatest runs of all time. And at that point, we could start using words like legacy for Giannis.